Welcome to the special edition of the Military Wire Vision 2020 Today Total Speaker Series, the special speaker series where we interview America's most elite men and women who have served this country. We share their stories of overcoming in hopes that you, our listener, can gain a bit of advice, tips, etc. that you can apply to your own life. And our goal today is that you get that advice and those tips for your life. So today's episode is sponsored by Bone Frog Coffee Company. This is a great new company, America's best coffee, that with each purchase of the coffee, a portion of the proceeds go to the SEAL Legacy Foundation to help support the families of fallen SEALs. So be sure you guys check those out today. Check those guys out at bonefrog-coffee.com. So our topic today is America at war? We see the violence in the streets. We see that churches have been shuttered. Many are struggling emotionally, financially, some even spiritually. Some don't even feel safe. And so we're going to unpack this today on this episode. Our guest today is truly one of America's most elite who has helped keep America safe, often behind the scenes and without fanfare. Lieutenant General retired William Jerry Boykin was one of the elite warriors chosen in 1978 to make up the first unit in America's ultra-secretive and deadly Delta Force. He then became the commander of the unit and still later commander of all U.S. Army Special Forces. And over his 36 years of serving this country, he did a tour with the CIA. And prior to his retirement in 2007, he served as the Deputy Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence. General Boykin, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be with you.
Well, sir, it truly is an honor. I've got to say that I read your book, your first book. I know you've got a new book coming out called Man to Man, but this book, Never Surrender. And it really encapsulates a lot of what you accomplished over your 30 plus years career to this country. You've got medals, you've got honors, you've got wins, you've got tough losses. I remember seeing the first loss, I guess we would call it, when we had the Iran hostages. But you did all of this behind the scenes, often without fanfare. You've accomplished great things, but you didn't start that way. So tell us, why did you ever select the military?
Well, I grew up in Eastern North Carolina. Eastern North Carolina, of course, has some very large military bases, and
Right.
Cherry Point Marine Air Station, Camp Lejeune Marine Base, and then, of course, the largest Army installation in terms of numbers of people, Fort Bragg, North Carolina. So I grew up in an environment and a culture where there were a lot of people that had served in the military, and it was a very pro-military environment. And more importantly, my dad, who grew up on a tobacco farm in Eastern North Carolina, was one of 6 brothers, 5 of which were in World War II at the same time. Wow. In fact, my dad was the only one that was wounded in World War II, but there were 5 of the 6 that served in World War II. And there was just a tradition and an expectation that if your name was Boykin, you were a male, you were going to serve your country before you pursued whatever your life pursuit was going to be. And so I knew coming out of college that I was going to serve. So I went to Virginia Tech, which has a corps of cadets. It's called one of the 5 major military colleges, which has a separate corps. And for 4 years, I marched on that parade field, just waiting for the day that I could take an allegiance to the Constitution of the United States and become an officer in the United States Army. And I did that in December of 1970. Made my dad very proud, met his expectations, and then I spent 36 years doing that. So I was very honored and privileged. And let me emphasize privileged, because there is no right to serve in the military. I was privileged to be able to serve for 36 plus years.
Wow. Walk me through what you mean by that, sir, when you say a privilege to serve versus a right to serve. I've not heard that before.
Yeah. First of all, there's absolutely nothing in our Constitution that gives anyone a right to serve in the military. Serving in the military is one of the highest privileges that we as Americans have. And frankly, everyone can't do it, period.
Mm.
There are people who have physical limitations, not their own fault, but they just don't have the right physical capabilities to be able to serve in our military. The military only has one mission, and that's to fight and win the nation's wars. It's not a test bed for social experiments or anything else.
Hmm.
So when they talk about people, it's not fair that you won't let people serve in the military because of this or that. That is a bunch of nonsense. They don't have a constitutional right to serve. It's a privilege to be able to serve.
Yeah.
So when you're a young man in high school, make wise decisions. Don't wind up with a felony charge on your record because you're not going to be able to serve in the military.
Mm. Yeah.
Because
Do you think we've lost maybe sight of that, and that we've kind of made the guidelines or the parameters to serve this country? Have we stretched those a bit? Have we lost the sense of privilege to serving?
I think we have, and I think that what you saw, certainly in the previous administration, was I think that you saw there was not a real understanding of what our military is about, and I think that there was a lack of understanding of what a privilege it was to be able to serve, and there really is no right to serve.
Mm.
You have a right to be an American because you're born as an American, but you have no right to serve in the military any more than you have a right to serve any place else in the government. You have to earn that place, but in earning it, you have to demonstrate that you have the mental and physical capabilities to be able to do the job that's required of you. Because keep in mind that our military is a reflection of the people of this nation, and it is a front line of defense for them against foreign powers.
Yeah.
So we need to put men and women in there that are focused on the mission and that are not focused on things that have nothing to do with winning wars.
Mm. And that's so good. And I know we're going off topic a little bit, but I think this is so important. And those who are joining us live, if you guys have questions, feel free to put your questions in Q&A. We'll work to get to those toward the end of the show. And I've gone way off script, General. So if you want to put me back in order, that's totally fine. But
we're good. We're doing good.
This is an interesting topic to me because I have been asked before, Mike, do you think that people should have to serve this country? And I've often responded that yes, I believe there should be 2 years of service, not necessarily the military. It could be Peace Corps, it could be teachers across borders, it could be you name it, but just so people get that sense of service above self. What's your thoughts on that? People serving 2 years, maybe almost like the Israeli model to some degree, before they jump into, being another productive citizen in America.
Yeah. Let me just say that I did live with the Israeli army for a period of time, and what we believe is their system actually isn't quite what it really is. Okay, yeah. We've heard a lot about their system, and fundamentally it is national service. I'm all for national service. I am certainly fine with national service so long as the military is only one option. And that is an option for those who can meet the requirements to serve.
Yeah.
But then there should be other ways that people could serve their country. I'm okay with that. I wouldn't push it. I wouldn't be the one out there leading the charge on it. But because I have seen what the Israelis do, and I've seen the benefits of it, even though it's not exactly what we think it is. I would be in favor of national service for a year or 2 years, just to let people have a sense of investment in their nation.
Yeah.
You just think about some of these people that are out here rioting in the streets today. Think of some of them that are in their 20s, in their maybe even teenagers. What's their investment in this country that they're tearing down? What's his investment? And what in your city? What is their investment in the city of Seattle or in the state of Washington or in the United States? Well, national service would at least give them a sense of having served their country They've got an investment in this country, which gives them more of an incentive not to let it be destroyed.
Yeah, gosh, that is so true. Yeah, we have talked about that, and certainly being in kind of close to the hotbed of where a lot of this stuff kicked off. There have been many of us that have asked that very question: is, boy, when you invest in something, you start to protect it, no question. And when you don't have an investment in it, it's okay if something bad happens. And I think that's such a great point. I love your history, how you were selected, and the story that's featured in Never Surrender, really how Delta Force was shaped, the early days of that. And I encourage people to get that book for sure, because it shares a lot of your story there, certainly your faith walk as well, which is very important to you. And you talk about the grueling selection process in the formation of Delta Force, and how your faith became a focal point to that, where I don't know if that was a defining moment or not. I'd love if you'd share that, but what did that experience teach you? I want you to paint the scenario of what happened before you were selected.
Yeah. First of all, the selection process was about a 30-day process. They issue you a bunch of equipment and take you into the mountains in the middle of the winter. And then it's based on a Special Air Service, British Special Air Service model. And then for the next 30 days, you are put out every day by yourself with a very heavy load on your back and required to go from point to point through the mountains. And you find your own way, and they never tell you what the standard is, and never tell you, how long you have to get from one point to the other. You just go. And when you get there, then they send you to the next point. So it's very grueling, and it extends out over a period of time, and then weather is always a factor. So it's probably one of the most grueling things that the military has. In fact, I would say that it is the toughest, physically toughest thing that the military has, but it's also a mental drill.
Mm-hmm.
And that is because you don't know what the standard is. So you are forced every day to rise to your best effort.
Yeah.
To put your very best into it, not knowing whether you're passing or failing until they tell you to get on the truck and you just suddenly disappear.
Mm.
Now, that said, for me, it was also a test spiritually, because I realized fairly quickly in this process that I was not going to make it through this thing unless it was the Lord's will for me to make it, unless I had some divine help. So as I would walk through those mountains, trying to find my way to my next point by myself, I would pray. So I would say that every day I was in a fairly extensive prayer, because if I was out there for 12 hours, I was praying for 12 hours. That said, it was one of those situations where I really had to submit myself to God. I mean, I really had to understand that I was totally dependent upon Him. I was going to do my part, but I knew that without God doing His part, I was not going to succeed. And as it turned out, I really came out of this thing. We started with 118 people, and we finished with 19.
Oh, wow.
And the very last day, we went 40 miles through those mountains. Each man went 40 miles. And I did that in what was a significant time. In fact, it was at that time, it was the second fastest time that was on record there. It was 11 hours and 27 minutes. I went 40 miles through those mountains with a very heavy rucksack.
Wow.
And I came in first. And I just knew that I had done that because I had the Lord Himself helping me through this process. Some people will say that sounds ridiculous, that sounds foolish. Well, not for me, it wasn't. I was praying. I was submitting myself to the Lord's will. I was saying, if this is where you want me to be, help me to make it through this.
Yeah.
Give me what I need to get through this. And He gave me the strength that was beyond my own physical capacities to actually not only finish, but to be first on that 40 miler, to come in first. So, I was very open about that. I mean, everybody, I didn't back off, and I wasn't in people's face. I wasn't telling them they were going to hell because they were living a sinful life like some people think it is part of being a Christian. That's not what I've been called to do.
Yeah.
But I was open about my faith, and that ultimately got me crossways with the psychologist who believed that I just wouldn't fit in because I was a little, too dependent upon my faith.
Mm.
So I wouldn't fit in with these tough guys. And as I said in the book, I thought, when he said you're too dependent on your face, I was thought, yeah, you're dependent upon your nose to breathe, and I just might break it for you here. And that's probably sounds a little unchristian, but I was a young Christian at the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
But I mean, that was my flesh thinking that way. But ultimately, the commander decided to accept me. And even with the psychologist recommending against it.
What I love about that piece of your story, sir, is that you were dependent on your faith, but it wasn't like, okay, God, get me through this. It almost sounds like it was like, okay, God, we're in it. If it's your will, give me the strength to go ahead and finish. And I think oftentimes we see in culture today, certainly in the Christian faith, is, hey, God, I understand that you're my ATM, so make this happen, as opposed to submitting to his will. And it sounds like that experience really taught you how to submit in many ways. Is that right?
Absolutely. Again, I was totally dependent
Yeah.
upon the Lord, but I didn't know what his will was. I didn't know that this was where I was supposed to be for sure.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that was the whole point of it. If you want me to be here, you give me what I need to get through. That was my prayer.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. Iran, Grenada, Somalia, I remember all of these, which dates me a little bit too, but and that experience in Grenada, I had no idea. That is, I mean, if anything, if people, I mean, the Iran, uh, that was enlightening in this book too, but Grenada, where you took a hit, um, and I don't want to give that away, but I mean, you were really sent into foreign territories to clean up messes, often behind the scenes. You had to balance family through all this. You share how you had family through all this. And, I think many of us know that work with, special operations, whether it's the SEALs, Delta, Green Berets, et cetera, that, the families struggle there. There's often a lot of pressures there, that oftentimes called the hidden sacrifices of being part of that team. And I know there's some listening and will listen, and they struggle with this is, gosh, you know what? I want to be on the front lines, keeping America safe, doing what I need to protect this country. But I've got my family at home too. And I know family is important to you. What is your word of encouragement to those who might be struggling with this on how to find balance? Is there a way to even find balance?
Yeah, it's important that if you have a family and you're in the military, that you understand perfectly well that the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, Coast Guard, at some point that's going to terminate.
Mm-hmm.
But what's going to still be there, if you do the right things, is your family. They're going to be there for the rest of your life. Unfortunately, guys get in and they get very excited about what they're doing, and it's a level of commitment. They get very excited about what they're doing, and they want to be part of everything, and they do that at the expense of their families. And then when they come home, they don't spend the proper amount of time with their families. When a guy comes home, he ought to put his cell phone in the other room.
That's good. Yeah. That's
Because
good for me too. My wife would love hearing you say that.
Yeah, but their family's going to be there long after the military. Now, it's still hard. I mean, even when you understand that and you make that commitment, you're going to take care of your family. You got to be willing to do things when you're with your family that aren't necessarily the most enjoyable things to do. but you got to be willing to go do these things because it's the family together, and it's something that the kids or the wife enjoy. And a lot of guys want to go do something that's adventuresome, something they want to do, when the family just wants to go to the theme park.
Yeah.
They're not interested in whitewater rafting. They just want to go to the theme park and ride the rides and see the amusements. So it is tough to balance it, but you also have to communicate with them. And let me say, having taught leadership and communications at one point, a man in the military needs to understand that when you communicate with your wife, you need to communicate with her in such a way that you are totally transparent with her. You need to be totally transparent with her. You need to tell her what's going through your mind. Now, there are certain things, let me say that has limitations too, because there's certain things you don't want to tell your wife. You might want to tell your battle buddy, but they're not, what was I thinking? But that said, you've got to let her into your world. You think by shutting her out, you're protecting her. But what you're doing is isolating and alienating her. You need to let her into your world.
No, when you say that, though, General, let her into your world was pretty dark at moments. Are you saying it's appropriate for, somebody that's going through that experience to let their spouse into that?
Absolutely. When you and this, I'm going to be graphic here. And I've talked about this at various times, but when you walk into that tent there that says mortuary affairs over the top of it, and some young specialist walks you down a row of body bags and opens every one of those body bags, and you look into those at the face of a soldier that you love and respect, that's under your command. There's nothing worse that an officer or leader has to do in his entire time in the service is to look into one of those body bags and realize that there lies a soldier that you're responsible for.
Yeah.
And you start asking yourself a lot of questions. Well, when you're to the point that you can talk about it, you need to let your wife in on that. You need to let her understand what you're dealing with. Because what we normally do as men is we shut them out of that kind of stuff. We don't talk to them about it because we figure it makes us look weak.
Yeah.
Or we figure we're protecting them from the unpleasantness of what we saw, but at least we give them an opportunity to be aware of what we're dealing with, what's going through our minds and our hearts, and maybe what stimulates certain reactions in us that make no sense to them. There are things when you've really been in it, as I'm sure many of the people on this broadcast have been, when you've really been in it, it may be 10 years later, but there will be some event or some smell. It may be a smell. It may be an event of some kind of loud noise, an explosion, or it could be just a sight of something. It takes you right back to an unpleasant situation. You're right back there again. And if you haven't talked with your wife about that, she's going to see your reaction to certain things that make no sense to her whatsoever.
Yeah.
She's going to wonder if you're starting to lose it. And what she needs to understand is that this is a reflection of something that was very unpleasant in most cases. And what you just saw, smelled, heard, brought you back to that.
And I think you're talking about creating that true trust bond with your life partner and I think, I think the studies do show that oftentimes, couples struggle in that, communication or lack of communication, unmet expectations or things that they just don't talk about. And I think it's amazing advice, and thank you for sharing that. Personally, it's something that my wife and I have worked through over the 25 years. And I think every year I get better, and I know that every year I have more work to do, right? So
Yeah.
it's,
Yep.
it's not easy. I want to switch gears a little bit because our topic was, is America at war? And many have asked that question, both spiritually and certainly maybe even on the brink of a civil war. And there's a lot of misinformation out there. It's really hard to know what is true anymore. And
Mhm.
what was compelling to me, sir, was in 2003, you were essentially targeted as a Muslim hunter. I'm going to use that phrase. You often led prayer for your team, so it was easy to kind of put you in that box. I think NBC did a piece on you without even interviewing you, calling you, these are my words, but kind of a hell-bent evangelical on a mission to go ahead and help Muslims get their heaven sooner. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but that wasn't even close to the truth. And it kind of puts you in the crosshairs, and you had to deal with that. And so, I think there's many people today that are going, man, I feel like I'm in the crosshairs of all this misinformation. I don't know who to trust, what to say, what to believe. How did you walk yourself through that experience? But more importantly, today, between all the media sources, how does one decipher the truth?
Yeah, that's a very good question. First of all, there is no single source of information that you should rely upon for decision making or for your total understanding of any given situation. Um, and I obviously we've got some outlets that are more reliable in terms of telling the truth or giving you the whole story. Some are more reliable than others, but none of them are 100%. What
Mm-hmm.
I have learned is that if let's just say, for example, I see something on Fox, I will go dig into 4 or 5 different sites that I go to every day, sites that I get emails from every day. And there are plenty of them that are credible, that do a pretty doggone good job. But I'll dig into 4 or 5 of them to see what they say about the same thing. Or I'll Google it to see what others are saying about it before I take it as being the absolute truth. So right now there's, as we speak, there was a building that exploded in Beirut.
Mm.
A lot of speculation about what that is, but I'm not taking any of that until I have done my own research. I'm not taking any of that as gospel. There seems to be some evidence coming out that it may have been a Hezbollah weapons factory or something, but it could also have just been a terrorist bombing. And I'm only using this as an example.
Sure.
I'm not going to go on Fox and put out something that is that I'm not absolutely sure of, that I haven't checked my sources. And I still have some sources that I talk to in different parts of the world on things like that. But then when you look at what's going on domestically here, you got to really be careful on this, because there is so much disinformation. And this is what we as Americans need to understand. The Soviets wrote the book on disinformation. The Russians wrote the book on disinformation. And they shared that with the Chinese. They shared their know-how with the Chinese and the North Koreans and a variety of others. In fact, most of those old Soviet Union states became quite good at propaganda as well, and disinformation. And you're seeing a deliberate disinformation campaign going on in this country to do just what you were talking about, to get us to run off on conspiracy theories and discredit ourselves.
Yeah.
And we avoid that by checking our sources and being sure that what we're talking about and what is being said is actually true.
Well, and it creates such polarization, right? I think that, when did you realize that there was such polarity in this country, that is it in fact at its peak? Are we at the brink of a civil war, so to speak?
Yep. In 1958, The Communist Party USA wrote a book called The Naked Communist. It is back in print again, matter of fact, because enough people are buying it now. Some for the wrong reasons, but The Naked Communist. And then the other book is called Rules for Radicals by Saul Alinsky. Okay, take those two books, spend a little bit of time reading them. What the Communist Party USA told us they were going to do in 1958 was they told us how they were going to take over America.
Wow.
Read that book. Yeah, they were going to take over America, and guess what? We laughed at them. Everything they said they were going to do, we thought, that'll never happen in America. You're not going to do that, and et cetera, et cetera. And what you're seeing unfold right now is right out of their playbook. What you're seeing unfold right now is a Marxist takeover of our nation. And they have been waiting for this moment for a long, long time. The combination of COVID and the restrictions on America and feeding us bite by bite, all of these restrictions that we are willingly accepting without opposition in the interest of security, personal security and group security. Now, what's the next excuse that will come along? But then when you add to the way we're being forced to give up our rights, and we're doing so willingly, then you add to that the rioting that is taking place after the George Floyd killing. Well, do you think that was just spontaneous? No, it was not a spontaneous thing. First of all, Antifa goes back to the 30s in Europe. You need to study Antifa and figure out who these people are. Secondly, Black Lives Matter is a Marxist organization, and they admit it. They admit they were Marxist. And they also admit that one of their objectives is to destroy the nuclear family. We'll go back to 1958 and read the Communist Party USA's book, The Naked Communist, and they'll tell you that what they were going to do, but one of their major targets was the nuclear family. They were going to destroy the family because the building block of American society is the family. If you destroy the family, you destroy the society.
So how do we get it back if we are in fact, because I know people have struggled spiritually with this too. Like, okay, if this is part of God's plan, we know how it ends. So I guess I'll just not do anything. Others have taken a more proactive role, but how do we grab it back? What can we practically do?
Yeah, well, first of all, you can't sit on the sidelines anymore. I was just reading this morning in my morning Bible study, Psalms 94. And if you go to Psalms 94, verse 16, it says, "Who will take a stand against this evil for me? Who will rise up against these evil doers?" That is talking to us as believers. It is saying, who is going to stand against evil? We can sit here now on the sideline and say, I'm just going to serve the Lord. I'm going to serve the Lord. I'm going to pray and I'm going to worship the Lord. Okay, but what are you going to do about the evil in the land? Are you going to take a stand against this evil? That's why he's asking that question in Psalm 94. What are you going to do? Who's going to stand up? Who's going to take a stand and say this is wrong? Who's going to take a stand against all this rioting and this effort to defund the police? No, we're too afraid we're going to be called a racist or a bigot. Well, where's your faith? Where's your faith?
So when you take a stand, I get it, and it's a scary thing to do. I think for many, take a stand, meaning I am going to go ahead and let my, faith show. And now I'm going to be a target. Obviously, Seattle's famous for this, that if you oppose the radicals, they show up at your house. Yeah. And, but when you say take a stand, what can the everyday person of faith, the Christian person sitting there at home in the pew going, you know what, we got to take this back. Sir, I don't know what to do. What do I do? What does that mean? All I know to do is pray. What would you say?
That's where you start. Yeah, that's where you start. You absolutely do. You start with prayer. Second thing is you get registered and you vote. And it's not just for the President of the United States, it's for the local school board. Because a lot of this nonsense comes from the fact that the Communist Party USA robbed us of our history in our schools. And that's what they said they were going to do. So you vote. You vote for the school board. You vote for the city council. You vote for the mayor. You vote for those positions that today you're seeing how important they really are.
Right.
Because you got a mayor in Seattle that has done absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
That has allowed total secession for 6 blocks of your city.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so you vote. The third thing you do is you use social media and any other platform you have to state where you stand on these issues, or to stand with people that are under fire for taking a stand.
Yeah, great point.
Come in behind them. You lend your support to them. And then you look at good organizations that are out there making a difference every day, and you support them financially.
Yeah.
You can put money into those things. And you go to organizations that you really trust and you say, I want to volunteer some of my time. What can I do to help you? How about I'm pro-life.
Yeah.
That won't come as any surprise to anybody because I've been pretty open about it, but I'm pro-life. And in fact, and let me plug this. This is my new book. It's called Man to Man. And the subtitle is Rediscovering Masculinity in a Challenging World. And by the way, it's doing very well, but this book is not politically correct. In fact, even some of the reviews talk about how it's not, I think somebody said this is not a book for snowflakes, because I come right at these men's issues. But one of the things I say is, you talk about how you're pro-life. What's the last time you did something in the pro-life movement? When was the last time you went to a crisis pregnancy center and said, can I volunteer a couple of hours a week? Can I help you in some way? What can I do for you? What about a homeless shelter? Your Black Lives Matter. What have you done to stop the abortion of Black babies?
Yeah.
In this country, which is disproportionately minority babies. And so there's so many ways that we can get involved. We can get engaged. We just have to be willing to step out and do so. Get in behind the candidates that are running for key offices in your city and your state. Get in behind those candidates.
And I think that's a great point. Today, and I know we're running a little over on time, so hopefully that's not too much of a trouble. I'll do my best to wrap up, and I know some people have some questions. We'll see if we can get to those. But you now work for Family Research Council, and I love how you have family as the center, and your motto is primarily to advance family, faith, and freedom in public policy and the culture from a Christian worldview. People who relate to this worldview, how can they support you guys? How can they get involved?
Well, let me tell you a couple of things. One is we put out a daily. Now, right now it's on hold because it's August, and we put a lot of people on vacation in August. But starting back the 1st September, we put out a daily bulletin. You can go to frc.org. We put out daily bulletins. A lot of the key stories that come out in the news and all that, we will write about them and give you sort of the rest of the story on them. We'll give you the facts. We'll give you who's involved in it and so forth. So we actually put out a news service. Secondly, we have a daily radio program called Washington Watch. Comes out all over the country. And we bring on members of Congress. We bring on members of the cabinet. We bring on experts and other things. And we talk about these issues that are so important to us as Americans, us as Christians, and us as family members. So you can read our daily publications. You can look at our listen to our radio program, and then we put out issue papers on the topics that you're dealing with every day. We put out issue papers, and we call it our Biblical Worldview Program. And we'll tell you what the Word says about these issues. We'll tell you how these issues have been handled historically and how they've been handled in the courts. But we'll give you issue papers on things like human sexuality, marriage, family, life, religious liberty, and all of those things. So, and then of course you could support us financially too. And we always need your support on that.
Yeah, well, and it's such a great mission. I love what you guys are doing. I love when my first book came out, that's how I signed it. You know, I was like a strong marriage plus a strong family equals a strong country. And
Yeah.
I'm a firm believer in that. And I know that you and 46 other flag officers, you guys signed a letter supporting President Trump, which I think some were shocked by because there were some that are opposing him for sure. There's a dividing line there, but giving him the authority to stop essentially the rioting and the lawlessness. And some say this is an overreach, but do you are firm in your belief that this is by no means an overreach whatsoever?
It is by no means an overreach whatsoever. First of all, let me point out two things. Number one, the National Guard works for the governor on a daily basis, except for the Washington, D.C. Guard, and they work directly for the president. But the National Guard works for the government on a daily basis. But when the governor is not defending the people of his state, they are still Americans. They still fall under the responsibility for the president of the United States. And when the governor is not defending them, he can federalize the National Guard and use them to stop the rioting and the looting in the streets of America. He can also activate active duty military people to do that. None of us that signed that letter want to see that happen, but we point out in the letter that it had happened already 20 times by 12 different presidents, starting with Thomas Jefferson, because the act called the Insurrection Act was passed in 1807. And 20 times by 12 presidents, it has been used. So those people that say this is an overreach by the president have no clue what they're talking about. And George W. Bush used it, and Barack Obama used it, just by the way, for more contemporary scene setting here. Both of them use the Insurrection Act. So it is not an overreach. We would like to see it solved by the governors.
Yeah.
We'd like to see it solved by the mayors. And even if they call out the National Guard, that would be fine. But the president has the authority to do so, and it's been done before.
Wow. Well, sir, I've first of all, I just want to say thank you. You've been very insightful. I want people to get your book, Never Surrender. I think this is a great book. Certainly Man to Man. I've not read that yet, but I plan on picking that up and reading that. And, you know, really summarizing this, is America at war? I think the answer is yes, in many ways. We are at war to what is fundamentally true and how this country was founded. And it requires us who are listening, those of us who have wondered what we need to do. I think it's, you're essentially saying it's time to step in. This is a call to action. This is a time to get involved, whether it's certainly start with prayer, but certainly also get involved with organizations that can help make a difference. Be a voice of support and be a voice of strength. And if I'm putting words in your mouth, please stop me, but I think that's what I'm getting from you.
Totally.
Yeah. Well, and sir, I just want to say thank you. I want people to be sure that they check out Family Research Council, frc.org. Pick up the books too, The Naked Communist. I'm going to pick that up, Rules for Radicals too, just to see what the other side might be reading, that I'm aware of it. There was many of us, we didn't joke, but we were really concerned that somebody got a hold of the PSYOPs manual and said, boy, this just seems like it's being played out today on how things are happening. Washington Watch, I think, is important for people to be aware of as well. But sir, I just want to say thank you. Thank you very much for your service to this country. I want to say thank you for your service to the family, for being on the front lines of this, for being a true voice of men and leaders who believe in family and family values. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much for having me on the program.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're getting responses here. And again, to our audience, be sure you check out Family Research Council, frc.org, and get involved. Stop staying on the sidelines. Now is not the time. Now is the time. Be sure you register to vote, get your vote out, start taking back your communities, and start fighting for what's really important, which is the family, God, and country. Sir, again, thank you.
Thank you.